Alright guys, today we are going to be working on bead ratio. I'm zoomed in extra close so you guys can see texture and consistency and whatnot, just so you can get a real feel for it. Don't mind my gravedigger hands, I'm doing my nails later. So for visual purposes, I am going to be using Dive In by the Queen's Corner, and I'm going to be using my Young Nails Cover Pink so that you guys can see the actual liquid and stuff. So first things first, let's come out a little bit. So first things first, we're going to go over how to pick up your bead. So first you want to burp your brush, which you're going to push it down until all the bubbles come out. You're going to move it around just to make sure there are no bubbles or anything. Let me see if I can get a better view of that. So push down and you see the bubbles coming out of that. Those bubbles will get into your acrylic and cause it to bubble or cause grooves, and it just won't look right. So you want to make sure you're always burping your brush when you first start. Now, before you go to pick up a bead, you're going to dip it in the monomer, and then you're going to drain one side of the brush, drain some of the monomer out, and then you're going to take the side that you didn't drain it on, the opposite side, and you're going to go to pick up your bead. You're not going to drag it through, and you're not going to dip it. What you're going to do is tap it 3 times, and that's going to help you pick up your bead. And the reason for that, let me show you. The reason for that is it keeps the acrylic on the outside of your brush instead of the inside. Because if you get acrylic inside of your brush, you're not going to be able to lay properly, and I'm going to show you why here in a second. So when you go to lay your bead, you're going to press and release, just like that. Now let me show you the difference between the two so you can see what I'm talking about, because if you have acrylic in your brush, when you go to lay your acrylic, it's going to leave grooves and bumps and lumps, and it's just not going to look right. So you want to make sure that you're not leaving anything behind if you can help it. Now after you release that bead, you always want to wipe your brush immediately. And in between every couple brush strokes, you're going to wipe it immediately again. Now, I'll show you the difference. So we're going to tap it. Now we have that bead. Let it polymerize. Wait till the whole thing's wet and there's no like visible powder on it. Now you're going to go press and release. Now, do you see how much is left over on my brush? There's not much. There's just a little bit right here, but not much. So when you go to wipe it, that's all that was left behind. Now, if you drag it, that pushes the acrylic into your brush. And when you go to release, this is what's left over, because you've pushed that down into the bristles. Now, when you go to pat it, that's going to grab more acrylic and pull that back into your brush. You see what it's doing? All right, now we're going to dip it after I clean my brush. So if you're pushing it in like this, you're doing the same thing. Now, when you go to push that bead down, you have all this acrylic left over on your brush on both sides. That's the result of dipping it. And when you go to wipe it off, this is what's left. So now you want to be cleaning your brush in between each bead, obviously cleaning it with monomer, draining it, wiping it off. Okay? Now let's look at the proper ratio. So you want to make it wet enough that you can move it, but also dry enough that it's not running down the nail. So I'm going to show you a dry one, and then I'm going to show you a wet one so you know the difference. See how I still have a lot of powder left on there? Now when I go to release it, it doesn't really leave a lot behind, but I have to work it really hard and get my brush wet again to be able to move it around. See how it stays clumped together like that? And it doesn't want to move. You have to add monomer just to get it to move. Now, let's look at a wet one. I'm not going to drain my brush, so if your bead is too wet and it's going to look like this, you're not going to be able to see anything on it except liquid. when you go to release it, it immediately starts running away. And it's almost impossible to work with. It takes off every time you touch it, and you have to sit and work it until it dries, which is going to take forever. And then same thing with the dry one. We're going to do another one of those so you can see what I'm talking about. Now when your bead is too dry and you go to put it down, not only do you leave a lot of crap in your brush, because if your brush isn't wet properly, you can't release the acrylic right. But when you go to try to shape it, it clumps up together, and you have to this is what happens when you don't add more monomer. So you have to sit and work it, and it dries really fast, and then you end up with the shape you don't like, and you end up having to do more filing. So let me show you the exact one that you're looking for. Start with a clean slate over here. So we're going to burp our brush, clean it out really well so there's no acrylic left in there whatsoever. Drain it on the side. We're going to tap 3 times, kind of bounce it. Make sure that it's all polymerized and it's all wet. We're going to go press it, release, and immediately wipe your brush off. Now you have no acrylic in your brush, and when you go to work it, nothing's going to stick to it. And it's not going to pull that acrylic away from your bead and stick it to your brush. And see how much easier that is to work with? Now, if your bead's too wet, like if you maybe don't drain it enough or whatever, and you notice it before you lay it down, little trick Danielle taught me. So let's say that my bead is too wet and I notice it, you don't have to waste that acrylic. What you can do is take the back of your brush, lay it down on the paper towel, and press down lightly, and it'll soak most of that acrylic or most of that monomer out of there. So when you go to lay your bead, now it's not too wet. And now you can work with it. See? Now, between every couple strokes, you want to make sure that you're wiping your brush on a paper towel, because the more acrylic is in your brush, the harder it's going to be to lay smooth. And I can show you some of that too, because I do that all the time, because, we all make mistakes. So now I intentionally got acrylic in my brush. We're going to go lay that bead down, and now I have this acrylic in my brush. So as I go to work this, each time I touch it, my brush is picking up more and more acrylic off of this bead. And it's leaving grooves on here. But let's let it dry a little bit and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Actually, we can do it with this one. If there's acrylic in your brush and you go to brush it with that, it leaves little bumps and grooves, and it'll drag the acrylic out of the bead. So you see the little dips that it's leaving here? Because of that little bump that's attaching to that acrylic. So you're never going to get a completely smooth bead that way if you have that in your brush. So you just want to make sure that you're cleaning it as often as you think about it. Now see the difference with a clean brush? You get a much smoother lay. And once your bead is laid down, you can pat it to kind of give it more monomer, because your brush stores the monomer in the body right here. So when you press on acrylic that's already on a nail, it releases that monomer onto it and wets it, gets it wet, whatever you want to call it, which can help you work it a little more if it's not where you want it. So all you have to do is re-wet your brush and press down to release monomer onto it. And as you're shaping and whatnot, it's going to keep releasing, and that's what keeps the acrylic from sticking to your brush. So you want to make sure that your brush is always wet enough to work with this. There we go. Nice and smooth. So now we're going to take one more look at the proper bead so you guys can get an idea of the texture. I'm going to try it in pink this time because that was pretty dark. So we're going to do our tap. Oh, I messed up. So we're going to tap. Make sure it all polymerized. Press and release. Now you'll see it kind of polymerize on the nail as it absorbs, as it finishes polymerizing on the nail. You'll see it kind of absorb all the liquid. And if it's the right ratio, you should be able to move it, but not pull any of it away. But it also shouldn't be running away from you. So you want it to stay in one spot. Now it will move a little and it'll flatten itself out, kind of level itself, but you don't want the whole thing running away. So basically just wet enough that you can work with it, but dry enough that it's not going to take off on you. Now see how fast that dried and how now there's no acrylic in my brush, so it's just laying right down. And this is the kind of consistency you should be able to get as it starts to set. Now, let's try this on a nail. So we're going to try this on a nail so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about instead of just on the cardboard. Give me 1 second. Sorry, you guys got to watch me do the setup. I was not prepared and didn't have my full cover chips out. Alright, so, and I'm going to be going over some stuff later in another video, how to lay the beads properly and what order to do that in, but for now we're just focusing on ratio. So again, let's use the pink for this one. So start to finish, you're gonna burp your brush, make sure there's no bubbles, make sure there's no acrylic in it whatsoever. Make sure you're draining it on the side of your dapping dish. Then with the side that you didn't drain, you're going to press and release. Now that's going to liquefy and you're just going to start working it across the nail. And because I don't have any acrylic in my brush, I'm going to be able to do that. So see how it's dry enough that it's not running all down the nail, but it's wet enough I can still move it. That's what it should look like. I'm going to pick up a slightly larger one. There we go. So you should be able to blend it. But if it's too wet, you won't be able to blend it because it'll leave spaces. All right, let's do one more. I've got my last bead for now. And you should be able to push it around to cover the entire nail. Depending on if that's what you want to do. But you should be able to push it where you need to without it running off the nail or absorbing back into the brush. There you go. Now, if you guys have any questions, don't forget to comment down below and I'll try my best to answer them. Don't forget I have my big giveaway coming up. Once I have a few more, once we reach a certain amount of subscribers, we are going to be doing the product giveaway. First one is at 100 and we're only about 20 people away from the first giveaway. So don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, blah, 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 to be entered in the giveaway. Also, I am taking requests for my next video. If you guys have anything in particular that you want to see, just comment down below and let me know. But otherwise, my next video is going to be the blood nails, the liquid nails. It's going to have, I don't even know what they're called. It's kind of like the aquarium nails, but with blood inside of them for Halloween. So if you guys have any other suggestions, let me know. Thank you.